Okay, so I know that last video was a really long one, but this one will be short, and that will be the end of the virus stuff, except for your activity that you need to do before the meeting on the second week. So we are now going to talk about viruses as pathogens. So we talked about virus structure. We spent a little bit of time on the different types of viruses and how they look, and then we spent a little bit more time on bacteriophages, which again are the ones that infect only bacteria. We talked about virus replication. Most of that was spent on bacteriophage replication, the lytic and lysogenic cycles. And then we did spend a little bit of time on the animal viruses and how those typically have a viral membrane and RNA, which makes them in some ways a little bit more complicated, but they don't have the two lytic and lysogenic cycles. Most of the viruses that we are familiar with are RNA viruses with viral envelopes. So we're going to talk now about viruses as pathogens. Okay, so viruses, besides the ones that infect bacteria, the phages, other viruses can impact plants, wild and domesticated animals, and also humans. So here's a virus that infects plants. It was talked about in your book, especially in the beginning of the chapter. This is the tobacco mosaic virus. Viruses can also affect dogs or cats, so your pets can be affected. This is just a goofy image of a woman putting a mask over her dog, but I don't know if you've ever had a dog that sort of started sneezing or had a runny nose or a cough or something. There's a lot of actually pretty nasty viruses for pets like parvo. It's a pretty serious virus that dogs can sometimes get from being in around other dogs a lot. It's pretty contagious. Bats can get viruses, and a lot of the viruses, human viruses that we have actually originated in bats. And one of the things that we think could have caused the coronavirus, most people think it's bats, but a similar virus exists in pangolins, which are an endangered species of mammal that are found in Africa. And they're, because they are rare, they often get captured and transported all over the world and then sold in markets. Okay. So the way viruses work is some of them cause the infected cells to produce toxins, and that's what makes the individual sick. And that can lead to the symptoms of the disease. Other viruses release their own toxins that cause the disease symptoms. So there's a few different ways that the symptoms occur. And obviously viruses vary in their virulence, which means how nasty they are, how likely they are to cause a lot of damage or death. And they also vary in how quickly they transmit or are transmitted from one host to another. And that causes a lot of issues in terms of which viruses are sort of the bigger problems, in terms of how deadly they are or how rapidly they spread. So what can we do to protect ourselves against viruses? The best way of protecting yourself against a virus is a vaccine if it's available. So what a vaccine does is it stimulates your immune system to recognize the virus and to attack it immediately. As soon as it sort of enters your body and starts impacting cells, your immune system, if it recognizes that virus, then it will attack the virus and kill it before it can do too much damage. So if you've been exposed to a virus in the past, your immune system builds up a defense against it. So that's why, things like chickenpox, if you've had that before, I guess you guys probably all got vaccinated for it, but I had chickenpox as a kid, but supposedly I will never get it again because my body recognizes the chickenpox virus, and if I were to be exposed to it, my body would recognize it right away as something that it's experienced before, and my immune system would attack it, so it would not make me sick. Vaccines basically do the same thing. It basically teaches your body how to recognize whatever the virus is that you're being vaccinated against. So, for example, if you get the flu vaccine, there's usually multiple strains of the flu, but they try to put in the vaccine the ones that are the most likely to be sort of moving around the community. And if you get the vaccine contains harmless components of the virus that allow your immune system to recognize it as, okay, this is something that is foreign. We're going to build up some immunity to it, some antibodies, which if we see this thing again, we're going to attack it and wipe it out before it can do any damage. So that's what a vaccine does. It stimulates the immune system against the pathogen. And if you can get a vaccine, you should get it, because besides that, we basically have no defense except for our immune system building up a natural defense against it. So it takes our immune system a while to react to a new virus. And once our immune system is sort of caught up to the replication of the virus and can start recognizing it and attacking it, that often takes a long time. And if the virus is really good at replicating in our bodies and does a lot of damage, it's possible that our immune system can't attack it fast enough. So we cannot take antibiotics to treat viral infections. Well, we could take them, but they won't do any good because antibiotics attack bacteria. They do not attack viruses. There are some antiviral drugs that we have that can treat some of the symptoms, but it can't cure a viral infection. So some things that they can do, though, are they can sometimes inhibit viral replication, and sometimes they can interfere with the viral assembly within the cells. So antiviral drugs have to be really specific. They have to be able to attack the virus, but not the host cells, because the host cells, in our case, that's a human cell. So it's got to get to the virus and not bother the cell that the virus is actually acting within. So it's kind of tough to have antiviral drugs that are really effective. Okay, so here are some emerging viruses. What an emerging virus is, it's a virus that suddenly appears, wasn't something on our radar before, and it starts to spread. So we've had plenty of emerging viruses over the past several decades. When I was in school, when I was, I guess, your age, or maybe when I first started at Birmingham Southern, AIDS was still a big deal. HIV was a big deal, and we were learning mostly about that because that was the thing that people were still talking about. Although now I remember it was a really big deal when I was a kid, when we didn't really know what it was or how to treat it or how where it came from. So yeah, that was when I was maybe even younger than y'all. So one example of a virus that you've heard of, an emerging virus that you've heard of, is Ebola. That's a really deadly one. And that one causes hemorrhagic fever, which is basically bleeding from all of your orifices, eyes, mouth, nose, ears, and it's often fatal. Here's what the Ebola virus looks like. So you can see it's a totally different shape than a lot of the other ones we've studied. Another one is the chikungunya virus. And this one I think is transmitted by mosquitoes. And here's the Zika virus, which is another recent one that has come out in the past 5 years or so. These are all viruses that have caused a lot of trouble for humans. Some other ones that you may have heard of: in 2009, there was a flu-like illness that appeared in Mexico and the United States, and this was called H1N1. This was kind of a big deal, but not nearly as big of a deal as the current COVID-19. So when a virus or any kind of disease starts spreading really rapidly and across multiple countries and has a global effect, it's called a pandemic. So the one that we've got going on right now, the disease is called the coronavirus, it's a coronavirus, which means it's in that category where I showed you before, where it's an RNA. I think it was a single-stranded RNA. It has a viral envelope. The disease is called COVID-19, and it is a pandemic, so it is a global problem, and it is caused by the virus SARS-CoV-2. That's because it is very similar to, this is for coronavirus, SARS-2 means it's really similar to the SARS virus that was a global problem not that long ago, within the past decade or so. I think it was 2013. So, and it's currently spreading internationally, resulting in massive loss of life and crippling the world's economy. So we talked a little bit about where these viruses come from and how do they become a pandemic. There are three main processes that contribute to the emergence of these new viral diseases. One thing that happens is that RNA viruses, like the human viruses that we've been talking about, have a unusually high rate of mutation. And what that means is they mutate a lot, their genetic makeup mutates a lot, and so that can allow them to move from one host to the next at a more rapid rate than other types of viruses. Also, I don't know if you know this, but the COVID-19 disease now is cycling in the world with, I think, 8 different strains because of these very rapid RNA mutations. So there's I think there's 8 different strains that are all over the world right now. There's one primarily that's sort of taking over the US, but a different strain is over in China. So also, one way that these diseases become pandemics is because you can just have one person bringing the disease from one place to the next, and it can spread really quickly. So if you have any kind of international travel, then originating from the place where the virus might have started, it can quickly basically infect the entire world. If there was no international travel and all these communities were super isolated, viruses might still be able to get around the globe, but it would take much, much, much longer to do so. And one thing that you may or may not know is that about 3/4 of new human diseases, and this includes the COVID-19 disease, originate from other animals, non-human animals, and they are spread from humans to animals, and usually through these wet markets where you see, people are hunting wild animals and then eating wild animals. So like bats and monkeys and apes and pangolins and all sorts of wild animals that carry very similar viruses, and all they need is a small mutation, and that will be able to infect humans. And when it does, that's a real problem because it's a virus that no human has ever been exposed to before, and so nobody has an immune system that's able to sort of fight it off immediately. And so that's what's happening right now.